also the tent, the Kensington theory about 10% of the population being gay, and also back to Du Bois's 10%, the talent for 10. So it's a layer of like all of those things coming together. Like that's the inspiration for the name.
Yeah, I just want to, you know, what's great about this last issue that we did, you know, we started out with the critique of our identities through this idea of slavery in the first issue. And then the second issue that we did was what we called our Americana issue. And on top of railing against kind of, you know, racism and classism, we understood that geographic elitism also exists in our community. So what the gay kids are doing in New York somehow feels more relevant than what the gay kids may be doing in Kansas City, but we soon learned that might not have been the case. That with the onset of digital technology and the internet, the kids in Kansas were a bit more savvy than the kids in New York, if you will. So what we did was go around the country, 4 fags, 5 fags most of the time, piled into a rental car, you know, not financed, this is completely independently published. And we went around and we wanted to capture stories and we wanted to meet and collaborate with other Black gay artists and intellectuals and thinkers and doers and kids living in all different places around the country. And what we wound up was with this piece we're calling the New Boy Next Door. So we started off in New York and wound up with the retrospective of a very famous Black gay photographer named Alvin Bauschak, who died in the early 2000s but was rediscovered by the art world posthumously, but was famous for capturing the piers and Manhattan as it was changing, and pre-AIDS Manhattan, pre-Disney Manhattan, before the development kind of came about. And there was something really powerful and beautiful in experiences of really marginalized people living on the fringes, not just metaphorically, but physically in places like the piers on the west side of Manhattan. So for us, it's about connecting the dots of our legacy as well, and connecting it to newer talent, and like a photographer, Matthew Holmes, who's a young student at SVA, in a collaboration that we did with Calvin Klein. Another part of our work is to go ahead and to have people put their money where their mouth is, right? So we support brands, we're consumers, and we've got big purchasing power. So to us, to be able to approach brands and say, we need you to support us on these projects, and to allow us to shoot interesting editorials, and to do projects with us. So in this case, we shot with a really young photographer, and took some really cool Black queer kids upstate New York and did a story called The Mist, which was a fashion editorial and also an observation about identity. So the work is not just featuring, but it's also a conversation about the bodies of work the artists that we feature are engaging in, and then we're always querying these ideas. So in this case, this is us back at college. I went to Cornell. We took, it was kind of a wild retrospective piece, which is quite fun to do. Right, this is a piece called The Boy Next Door. We did advertising, right? So it's not so easy to get advertising, so we say to ourselves, we create our own advertisements. We work with fashion illustrator Shannon Stokes in this case, who works commercially for magazines like Nylon and Fucking Young, and we were like, well, what do we want to say? And this is what kind of comes out of the genius of our community. We do features in New Jersey. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Cakes to Kill, but again, celebrating our own talent. Not really concerned about conversations that white people are having about this talent. For example, queer rap is really popular these days. It's being critiqued in the theater, it's all over the internet. But what does it mean, this idea of queerness, and how does that relate to our experience as Black gay men, and where does it intersect? What's funny about Kicks the Killer is that he performs around the world, Paris, London, you name it, but never for Black audiences. We had a magazine party and invited him down to perform, and can you believe this boy who's been around and been written about in Interview magazine has never performed for a room of Black gay men? So this is the question, these are the questions and these are the inconsistencies that we want to approach in the magazine. Really interesting piece written by Kevin Ewing, who's one of Michael's proteges as well at the New School. We did a model agent, Kyle Hagler, who represents Joan Smalls and Leah Cavetti. We did a piece about fashion and his experience. And then here we are in Boston. When we started with a really beautiful piece called Boston Revolution with Quincy Roberts and Corey Yarbrough. Corey's in the audience. Where we came up and we wanted to talk about the idea of what we know as Americans, as Black Americans, about Boston and the Tea Party and Paul Revere and all these things that we've learned that really are not true, and where do we fit into that, and what do our identities mean, and what's happening now, what's the new revolution in the Black gay community here in Boston. And we sat with these guys who run the largest Hispanic Black gay coalition in the city, and who are largely unrecognized but doing some really important work here. and had a really great conversation with them. Then we wound up with Nolan for a fun story. Nolan was a total muse. How adorable and cool and hip and smart is this guy. So, you know, here we are just having kind of fashion fun, and it's a 10-question interview from things about what is his experience as a student interested in ballroom and art and academics, all the way down to his first date in Boston, what was that like, and who'd he rather fuck, Marky Mark or Nick Jonas as Marky Mark? Neither. Because we don't play those racism things. But those are the things that we get to the bottom of. We did a piece called The British Are Coming, which is a group of queer kids out of London done as kind of Revolutionary War soldiers with this conversation about British street style and how it influences us here in America. Ibrahim Karam is a student at Central St. Martin's in London. And then we did a piece at Harvard called Harvard Square with a guy who's graduated in 2015, Cash Fulton. Again, the point of our piece is to show every different side, generationally, academically, cross socioeconomically, you name it. We're all pretty fabulous, and we just want to kind of put that out into the world. This is a great interview with Amir Dixon, who's in the audience right here. We did a film called Friends of Essex. And I just want to make a really interesting point. I don't know if you guys watched the show Empire. Do you? Does anyone watch Empire? Yeah, okay. So, you know, here we are. This interview maybe happened 6 months ago, but we had wound up talking about Lee Daniels. Talking about things that are contemporary in nature, but how does that relate to our experience and the images that we see of ourselves in the media? And we had a critique back then, and I'm sure that critique would continue when you look at work happening in mainstream media today on network television. It's a really interesting read. And then the piece kind of goes on. This is a piece about a black gay baby woman, Carrie Johnson, who wrote a really interesting piece. And it really goes on and on. I wanted to kind of just get you guys to the Boston part, obviously, because these are colleagues and friends of yours. But we really do appreciate the opportunity to have gone around and to have made as many connections with as many interesting people and been able to tell as many interesting stories and present it to the world. It just so happens that the museums and these kinds of fashion retailers are interested in what it's doing aesthetically, but for us, it doesn't really matter so much. It's more about the community that we're building and that transmission of knowledge and being on the public record as having something to say and interesting images to present to the world. So thank you guys.
So, Kari, you showed the piece around the pier, and as we were driving up here, we were talking about this conversation of Giuliani and the gentrification of the pier pre-AIDS, what the pier looked like, what it meant, its relationship to sex positivity, and to the disease of what's happened, right? And so, one of the things I wanted that she left, Tyra, when she comes back, I'll bring her in. But one of the things that I know that you have had conversations, you and Kyle had conversations with me about your intent of the magazines to do stuff around public health, in particular in relationship to black gay men. And you know, one of the things folks may not know in the room, but that black gay men have the highest HIV prevalence rate, not in the United States, but in the world outside of us. And one of the things that, let me back into that. I remember in 2001 when they did this YMSM study, looking at prevalence for young men who have sex with men between the ages of 23 and 29. What was huge then was that 33% of African American men who have sex with men was HIV positive. And that was a big thing. And then the next year they did an incidence study, just means how many people, how fast it's growing. And for researchers to look at future elimination of any disease, the incident rate needs to be 1.5 to 2%. And so when they looked at white men in that same age group, the incident rate was 1.5 to 2%. There's some structural reasons why the incident rate was so low. For Latino men, it was 3.5 to 5%, which is faster than it needs to be. In sub-Saharan Africa, where at the time there was 24 million people who were HIV positive, the incident rate was 6%. With African American men, it was 13%, twice as fast as sub-Saharan Africa. 2003, they did an HIV prevalence study in the household community. And what came out of that in New York City was that 17% of the community was HIV positive. 2005, they did a 5-city study looking at prevalence. No longer was it 33%, now 46% of black women were HIV positive. So when you continue to hear these numbers increase, when you continue to hear, you know, one of the things CDC put out in 2011, that for the very first time in the history of the epidemic, the incident rate leveled off across demographics, except for with black and men, there was a 48% increase. When you continue to hear this number in relationship to black bodies, how significant do you think this magazine is in relationship to black bodies, in relationship also to this epidemic, and in recording it, because you talked about public record, in recording this epidemic?
Well, it's interesting that you say, because a lot of that is happening when the statistics wise of breaking apart, it's definitely skewed towards the younger generation of kids that are having these high infection rates. And I think that a lot of that has to do with as much information about health that's surrounding and circulating in the world. I don't know that there's much of an understanding of historical context of this information. So I think what's interesting is that we're not having the conversation about HIV/AIDS amongst certain age groups, right? And I can remember specifically being very, post-90s coming out, and that was very much a big deal in our community. And I think that really not that it sounds, I don't want to sound